Yet another clean energy bill is on the table, just introduced in the U.S. Senate. Craig Sieben of Sieben Energy Associates is here to talk about the details. Welcome back, Craig.
Good to be with you this afternoon.
And this new bill, introduced by Senators John Kerry and Joe Lieberman, it's called the American Power Act. And does it actually still use the proposed cap and trade system that's been talked about to try and reduce carbon pollution?
Well, first, it's a significant improvement. They've been working on this since June of '09 for developing a stronger legislation. And they've made a number of modifications around allowances, emission permits, trading regimes. They've separated out what we're going to do for electric utilities from transportation. So they've worked with that basic framework, but they've made a lot of specific improvements which improve significantly upon the previous Waxman-Markey legislation.
Which was the one introduced in the House and passed in the House.
Yes.
Let's go over the emissions targets now in this new bill. It calls for reducing carbon pollution by 17% in 2020 and by 80% by 2050. Now, basically, how would this work? I mean, companies would be getting pollution permits from the government, is that right?
Yes, and the objective of the legislation was to put a price on carbon, was to establish a mechanism to reduce CO2 emissions. Nothing has changed about that from the legislation put forward in the House. So they have proposed to do that through allowances, through emission allowances when it comes to electric utilities, basically allowing permission to pollute, if you will, and establishing allowances that companies will have for electric utilities. When you move to transportation, they're putting, in fact, kind of a constant set of allowances so that you won't have to, a constant price, so that the transportation sector will not have to play the market on a regular basis. It's much easier to manage it from a market standpoint on the emissions from the electric utility sector and all other manufacturers. There's about 7,000 manufacturers that would be affected by this, but this legislation calls for it pushes back the timing from 2020 or from 2012 for electric utilities to 2013 and goes to 2016 for all the other 7,000 manufacturers in the economy. So the price is going to be really de minimis from most manufacturers in the U.S. economy, really de minimis over the next 5 to 10 years.
And these pollution permits, they would be traded on an exchange.
Yes.
And I mean, what is the risk and what are legislators trying to do as far as minimizing the risk of manipulation?
Well, they're looking at quite a bit of market structures that would seek to mitigate that risk significantly.
Okay, well, what about the penalty for exceeding carbon caps? Now, there's no hard numbers in this bill. Do you think there will eventually be?
I would think there would need to be in the future. One of the real drivers is that the EPA is currently scheduled to start regulating CO2 emissions. So one of the interesting political games here is that if they don't do it through market mechanisms, we're going to see EPA regulating it through EPA rulemaking. And many companies would prefer to see a market mechanism versus an EPA mechanism.
One interesting thing I want to get to real quick, offshore oil drilling is addressed in this bill, and basically states would be able to opt out of drilling within 75 miles of their shoreline. So this is probably, obviously, an effort to get a lot of lawmakers on board this, right?
Yes, to give them the political out so that they don't have to basically have offshore drilling. We don't know what this disaster in the Gulf portends. I mean, it could go around Florida and go up the coast, of the United States. We just don't know at this point.
Yeah. All right. Well, there's lots of changes, obviously, that is going to be made to this bill that's been just introduced. Thank you very much. We'll be following it with Craig Sieben of Sieben Energy Associates.
Thank you. Good to be with you.